All right. Luke, are you ready?
I'm as ready as I'll ever be.
Take it away, Luke.
Awesome. Well, welcome everybody. So this is Soundposts. Um, so this is sorry, I sound a little funny today. I'm getting over a cold, and this is the day everything's draining out, so I sound worse. This is the worst day I've sounded. Um, anyway, so we're gonna look at installing a Soundpost into this violin, and we've got the inside view there and all that good stuff. So basically, so to start, the sound post is just a little wooden dowel. This is the one that was actually cut for this violin. Someone else cut it. It's in fairly decent shape. There's really no need to replace this one because it does still fit. But we're just going to cut a new one just to show you the process on this one. You'll see that the two marks in it. Let me see if I can find the camera. There's two little marks in that sound post, and those are from the Soundpost setter. So your Soundpost setter is this tool right here, and your setter has a bladed end to actually stab the Soundpost with, and then an adjustment end. This one is kind of the wing. I always call these kind of like the bat wing. Looks like a Batman symbol uh, style. There's also the the more generic model that you'll see. These are the cheaper ones like this that they come flat and then you bend the curves that you want, and they have kind of a four prong setter end for the adjustments, and then just your other bladed end. Now, one thing you will find, a lot of these will come with a really fat blade on this, so they're really tall. um and let me see, show you. I've got a base one that's still kind of, this is kind of the factory shape that you see a lot of the time. It's a fairly tall, broad blade. These work okay, but I actually like to grind them down into a little more of kind of a knife blade, so they actually go a little deeper into the post. It tends to hold a little more secure when you're trying to manipulate the sound post on the inside. So that's just kind of one thing you can kind of play with and decide which style you like better. This is one that like this shape was one that I was watching a couple different videos of some guys, and they had this style of edge, and so I ground this one first into that shape and tried it and was like, oh, I really like that. For me, it just seems to hold a lot more secure. So that's when I went and I ground this one down to a little more of a blade type edge. This one isn't quite as pointy; it's somewhere in between. And this one's kind of turned out to be my favorite. So not quite as big, and so it just feels more secure. And one thing, you don't really want to polish these out to a mirror. Like if you actually leave kind of the grinder edge on the sides of this, they actually will hold a little more secure than having them fully polished out. Having that kind of texture on the side, it grips on a little better. So that was, you can see on all of these, I have left the grinding marks on the actual sides of the blade, just so that there's a little more texture. The other tools that we're using, now you can either do this with a chisel or with just, the violin maker's knife, whichever one kind of, there's both are correct options. Whichever one you're more comfortable with using. I've done it with both. I tend to actually use the knife more than I do a chisel, but it's definitely one of those where there is, a chisel is just fine. I'll show you kind of how to use, how to do both. It's the same thing basically. It's really handy just to have a really thin tape measure. So this is one of those like little, you ever see those like little tiny measuring tapes that are like the keychain ones or whatever. This is just one of those. I just cut the a chunk of that measuring tape out of, so that it's really thin and flexible. And I use this for actually going into the sound hole and getting kind of that first measurement inside the violin. Since it's nice and thin, it just drops right in, no problem. Um, the other thing that's kind of an optional, this is a sound post retriever. You don't have to have one of these, but it definitely makes life a lot easier. It's basically just kind of a little clip on the end of a metal rod, and it's just so when you go down inside of a violin, it'll clip down onto the sound post, and it's just easier to get out of the violin. And they make these for cellos and basses and all that stuff. So these are handy if you're going to get into it and do it a lot. If you're going to do a lot of setups, I would suggest getting one just because it's really easy to get in there, clip that onto the sound post on the inside, and get it out quickly. Your other way of doing it is you have to use the blade end of the sound post setter and try to hit one of these old, marks in the sound post, pushing it into the back of the violin, and then get it out. And so this is, you never can get it quite secure, or sometimes you'll rupture out the side of the sound post by trying to push it in there hard enough to get it to grab. But anyway, so the sound post is a piece of spruce, just a spruce dowel. You do want to orient these in the cross grain of the top. So when you look at this, when you look at the post, you'll actually see the actual grain in it. That's because this would be like the long grain is running through the dowel, and and so then the grain of the top. Let me push this over a little bit so we get a better view of the violin top. So the grain in the top is running vertically. So you'll want the grain in the sound post to run a 90 degrees to that. And that's just so that you don't have the two different grains mesh together. And you like, if you line them up, the two grains will actually work into each other and they'll kind of have like teeth on there, and it makes it really hard to ever adjust or move that sound post again. So you'll like you see them in old violins where they've got installed in the wrong orientation, and then they get this like domed notch like on the inside where that sound post is kind of has worked in this divot on the inside of the top. The back isn't as big a concern because it's maple. All right. Sorry. So first off, as far as cutting these, now if you have an old sound post, so if like this one already had one in it, so if you're just cutting a new one, you actually have a fairly good way to actually get a decent starting length, because this is close, so you can just cut it a little longer than that. If you don't have an existing sound post, if it's like a new violin or they've lost it, there's been many times people have come in and they're like, oh, there was something rattling on the inside, I pulled it out and threw it away. And then you have to cut a new sound post for it, because that's how that rolls. That's where this little tape measure comes in. So this one this actually has standard and metric on it. I always use the metric side because it's just a little more precise. You actually just stick it in the upper lobe of the F hole and go, if you look at the endoscope on the inside, you'll see that tape measure. Now, this will give you an approximate length, because we're actually setting the sound post behind where the bridge would go. So on this, if you look at the top of this violin, you'll see where the foot has made a mark here on the top. So we're actually installing it slightly behind that. So measuring up here at the upper lobe, the inside cavity is actually a little small compared to where it will be. But this will give you something close. So this says if I measure from the inside of the back to the outside of the violin top, I have 5 centimeters. And I will usually add about 3 more millimeters to that. And that should give me plenty of length to fit down to the inside cavity. So I'll just take that same ruler, stick it on the sound post material, give me a mark. Now on this one, obviously, since I haven't the old sound post that fit, I can actually take and just double check that and make sure that that's reasonable. And it actually looks like I'm about 2 millimeters. Let's see, find the camera. I'm about 2 millimeters longer than the sound post. So that gives you kind of a good average. So adding that 3 is going to give you about a millimeter on each end to fit down to that curvature of the inside of the plate. And that is one thing, as you look at that picture, that view of the inside of the violin, you'll see that they're tapered. That if you look at this from the side profile, the top and the bottom are both on a taper. So that's how that's easy. You put this in and then pull it towards the outside and it tightens. Now, the way I cut these off is actually just use the knife, stick it on that mark, and actually just roll the sound post back and forth. And you'll just slowly kind of saw your way down through the sound post material. Once you have a decent sized notch, it just pops. No big deal. Now, since this is end grain, it's easier to cut if you dampen it. So the way we learned in school is you actually just lick the ends. If you want to use a sponge, that's fine. But this was definitely, old school. You just stick it on your tongue, dampen that end grain, and now that end grain will cut a lot smoother. Now, I've seen guys set up a jig for this where they will take a wooden block, drill a hole that the sound post will slide down through, and then it has a tapered top surface so that you can keep it square. That's cool if you want to set up one of those. I've never used one, but it's definitely like it's an idea um, that you can definitely do and try out. But as far as like the way I do this, I will look once I've dampened that, you can really see the grain orientation in that sound post. And I will actually start by putting a notch in, using the sound post setter and go a little above half. And actually go ahead and put that notch in where the sound post setter is going to sit. And basically that's just to orient the sound post. So now when you're fitting this, you always have a reference of what will be the outside of the sound post. So that's really the only reason I do that right now is just to give me a marker so that I don't cut the taper one direction, go turn it around and cut it the other direction, and have them in an equilateral instead of a kind of a trapezoid shape.
So hey Luke, when you said the outside, do you mean to the treble side, where you're using?
Yeah, because you're always working to the outside edge. Yeah, so this will be under the treble side.
Okay, cool.
Because the bass side has the bass bar. I've got a violin top off. Let me grab it real quick. And now this violin has a really weird bass bar. This one I'm going to show you. So this has a double bass bar. It's an interesting concept. This is the only one I've ever seen like this. And I don't quite know how to feel about it. They just took two thinner braces and stacked them. They left a gap in between. So no idea what that does for tone. But anyway, so yeah, it's on this side. So the opposite of the bass bar. Flip that over. And you can actually see on this violin, I don't know if it comes through on the camera, you can actually see a circle where that sound post has been sitting. So that's what I'm talking about when I say they start to make their own divot. This is an old enough violin that this has a divot where the sound post has sat for years. When they get like this, they're really hard to fit because you'll start fitting this post and it will be sitting kind of out here in the middle, and you'll be like, oh, I got to go a little less, and then all of a sudden you have this point where it just drops, and it's actually taller at this point than it is just to the inside of it. So these get really tricky, and you don't always. They're like with a mirror, this divot is not always obvious. And so these will get really tricky. And once you figure out that there's a divot, then you have to set the top into that divot and then pull the bottom of the bass bar into place. And so you're kind of fitting up into that divot. But yeah, so when you get one like that, they are tough. All right. So now that I have the mark here on the side, I actually just start trimming this. And like I just use the knife is kind of my preferred on this. I also use the the belt sander. Now I don't turn on the belt sander, but I'll actually stick this on the table and then just rotate the belt by hand to fine tune this. That's something I definitely wasn't shown in school, but I've just kind of found. I actually started doing it on bass sound posts because they're so much larger and they're harder to fit. That I was like, yeah, I mean, I'm just gonna try this, see if I can make that work, and it does. It works really really well. So I'll show that in a minute.
I guess this is a total guess, but what angle would you say that typically is? Because it's going to change and it's moving, but.
Well, and it's not only that; it changes from violin to violin.
Oh yeah, okay, sure.
So depending on the height of the arch and then the graduations of it, it will vary. So it's probably only. I mean, it's like 3 to 4 degrees at most. Like it's very little. But it is one of those where you do like you're never gonna find two the same.
So that jig wouldn't be universal that you were talking about.
Yeah, it's kind of and that's why I've never done the jig. Is it's kind of it's a good starting point. And I mean, like I said, it is kind of a valid method because you are kind of getting you're kind of getting that angle on, you're getting the angle square, and then you can fine tune as you go. So I think it is a valid method. After you cut enough of these, you kind of don't need it. But it is a very valid method.
So Luke, if I could also ask you, you're cutting a flat plane at an angle to the direction of the grain. So,
yeah. No, it may not be flat when I'm done.
Right.
So depending on the violin.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, if you have a round back or a round top, like on a bass sound post, which is what I'm holding here, this is about 6.5 inches long, just to give you a reference.
Right.
Round backs, it's got a compound curve to it that's really tricky to fit. So if you could address some of those challenges later down the talk, that'd be great.
Yeah, and that's part of the setting. So as we go, and this is a fine time to talk about it. So right now I'm just cutting these flat, and that's merely so that I can find the angle. So I'm going to start sticking this in the violin and actually just checking my angle work to see if I'm in the neighborhood. And then as we get down to where we're almost have it to the right height, I'll actually start working on like just the front edge, where I'll just like shave a little off the front edge of the top and the back so that it mimics that curve of the plate. And this is where, like some builders will purposely leave the area where the Soundpost sits a little flatter. Like it actually, like if you stick like a profile gauge down on that arch on the inside, you'll actually see where there's a little bit of a flat spot. Very subtle, but it's just so that when they go to fit a Soundpost, they don't have so much of a curve they're trying to fit into. And so it is one of those where that is going to vary a lot. I have had a few, some of the old Bavarian violins, they have a really exaggerated arch. Fitting a Soundpost in them is just a nightmare because it's got such a steep curve on the right where the Soundpost goes. And then some of your like French violins that were a lot flatter arch, they're kind of hard as well because you can since there's not a huge amount of arch and there's not a lot of taper, like you can set it in the middle and actually pull it quite a ways in. So it's really easy to overshoot. Like you just take one shaving and all of a sudden you're clear at the F hole. Like you've ran past the point where you want to be. So there is plenty of times, and it's definitely one of those, like when you start cutting Soundposts, just know you're gonna mess up some. Like don't feel bad that you went too far or the taper's not right. It's just throw it away, cut another one. Because it takes a long time, and even even now, I still screw up Soundposts just because it's like I'm fitting away, and then I figure out finally that there's a divot. Like the divot was subtle enough, I didn't pick it up at first, and then so it's like, okay, I cut the Soundpost too short. Throw it away, throw it in a bin. Maybe you can put it in a different violin, and just move on. Don't get overly frustrated with these things. Okay, so I think I know I need to take off some more just to get in the neighborhood on this one. So I'm going to take a little more of an aggressive cut right here real quick just to get me in the neighborhood. Since I have the existing one, like I can get a pretty good idea of what I'm trying to fit. All right, so we're actually going to do a test fit on this and actually look at the fit of the violin. So you'll see on this one, I have a fairly dramatic taper on the top and on the bottom on this. It's probably more than I need, but it's just to, like I said, just kind of give me an idea. So as I stick this in, if you look at that inside view, you'll see that Soundpost coming in there. Now, one thing, and I don't have a view to show this. So right now the Soundpost is actually sitting on an angle towards so the top is pointing towards the bottom of the violin. It's not vertically, like it's vertical side to side, but not the other direction. And so that gives me a clear method, like I cannot stand this thing up yet. I cannot make it vertical yet because it's just too tall. So, and I'm actually going to do kind of the fitting right here into the middle of the violin first, and then I'm going to work my way towards the F hole. Since it's taller, obviously, in the middle, that's kind of the place to start. So I know I need to take off a bunch right now because I can't even stand it vertical yet. So I'm going to take off a pretty healthy cut. Now, as far as using the chisel, the way you'd use a chisel is you'll normally take like on the edge of a bench and just use that chisel blade, come in from that front edge and just work that taper back. And I know several guys, like when I was in school, it was about a 50-50. Half of us would use the chisel and just love it, and the other half was using a knife and just preferred that method. I've done the knife for so long that I have a hard time using the chisel.
Now you're going with the grain there in both cases, right?
Well, so since it's the taper, yeah, so it's the taper, so I'm always cutting from the lower side. So I'm coming up, up the grain,
Yes.
Cutting the grain off.
Yes, but you're not cutting across the grain. You're cutting with the grain.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is the end
Can,
grain.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, this is the end. So the end of the Soundpost is the end grain.
Yes.
So it is one of those where it is a tough one. The shavings you get, so make sure your knife is sharp. But these shavings, if you rub them, they just turn into powder because it's all just I'm cutting across the grain.
Okay, so it's just fluffing off. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, my knife is sharp enough right now that that is end grain that I'm getting a shaving on.
Right.
But there's no structure to it. Okay, so now I got to look, and you have to check your work occasionally. Look at it from the vertical, make sure that you're not, that cut edge isn't getting too far askew. This way you want it perpendicular. You can be slightly off as far as like trying to match the arch. Sometimes you'll have these that it's got, some type of a compound angle going on. But normally you want them pretty square. This particular, like the side to side angle on the Soundpost, you want pretty square. You don't want to have like an angle this way.
Yeah. Would you use the same knife on a bass Soundpost, which is far bigger?
Yeah.
Okay.
Actually, I will tell you on the bass Soundpost now, I almost entirely use the belt sander.
Right.
just because it's easier.
Yeah.
Now it is definitely one of those, like the first time you do it, you're gonna blow through a Soundpost in a hurry. But
you've been there, done that. Yes.
Yeah. It's super easy to blow through one on a sander. All right. So stick the Soundpost back in, kind of the same thing. It's a little more vertical, but not as vertical as I would like. We're getting very close, so I don't have to take off very much more to get me really close. Oops. And there's where you use the retriever.
Luke, I might have missed it. I was on a call earlier, but do you ever use these little height checker type tools for?
I haven't.
Okay.
But they're definitely. I mean, I see where they would shine. I just never, like when I was in school, we didn't use them, so I just never have.
Okay.
But they're definitely like I do own one, and I have used it, and I don't mind it.
Okay. Cool.
Now this one's being a bugger, getting back out. Come on. Yeah, I do like the. I think the one I have is for cellos. That sound that height finder thing, and I would have to. I don't even know where mine is. Like it's been a decade since I've used it. So but no, I think those would be. I think they're worth it. If you get used to using it, they're worth it. My only problem with those, I'll tell you, and it's just a matter of I haven't just used it enough, is you have to make sure you're in the right spot.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely had to modify the one I bought for basses and just make new legs for it because the distance was off. So yeah, but it definitely did save my butt because I was just so fresh doing a Soundpost this summer for that upright. But yeah, I wasn't sure if there were any other reasons why they can be an issue or not.
No, and that was just like I said, on the cello one, I had used it enough, and I used it. I thought I was in the right place. I was a little too far out, so right out of the gate, I cut it too short. And I was like, well, I'd rather cut long and work my way, But you still could do that. I just found for me the ruler was just as, efficient. Okay, so if we look on the inside there, so I'm not holding the Soundpost. It actually just went into vertical. It's being held there by tension. Now, as far as the position on this, the position of the Soundpost sits a third of the diameter of the Soundpost behind the bridge foot. So like the final position I won't do until I actually have the bridge and the strings on it, like the final adjustment. But it is one of those where that's the general area you're looking for. So just behind where the bridge would sit.
You're saying a third? Does that mean from the back of the bridge to the front of the post is about
yes.
a third of the okay.
About a third of the diameter of the post.
So you're talking like 2 or 3 in theory.
Yeah, 2-3 millimeters, somewhere in that neighborhood.
Okay.
And then it's one of those where once we actually go talk about doing adjusting the sound post, like I'm just going to grab a violin off the wall and kind of show you that. You're looking for the nodal point in the top. So there's some point where that top's going to start vibrating a little bit better because you got the sound post far enough away from the bridge. And so that's why it's not like a hard set like number. There is the one number that I use all the time is the distance towards the outside, like towards the F hole. That is a number that you can easily. So what I actually do is match the distance of the bass bar. So I go in through the bass F hole. I find I can't even get to. I got to use the bent ruler. Let me grab it. This one, the bass bar is short enough, I can't touch it with a flat ruler. So I have a couple rulers that I've bent to get that measurement.
And so you're not measuring to matching the outside of the foot?
No, I actually put it in the same spot as the bass bar.
Okay.
So I took an old, just like an old shop ruler you got from like the hardware store, and I actually just bent it. And so that way you can come in from the F hole and actually touch the side of the bass bar a little easier. And so this one, if I go to the position where I want the sound post, this sits at 22, which is a little deep. Most of the time those sit around 18 or 19 is kind of the average. So if I come in from this side and measure, I'm sitting at 24. So I don't have very much further to go. And so this will just be a little bit of a, fine tune the bevels, and I'll be calling it. So at this point I'll take a mirror and go in and start looking at my fit. So I just use one of these like dental mirrors. And this won't show up, like I don't have a good way to video that, but I just take a dental mirror and I actually go in there and start looking at my fit of the top and the back. And I can start to see that, like, okay, my front edge of this has got a gap on both the front and the top and the back. So I have a little too much of an exaggerated taper. So I need to flatten it just a little bit. And so now this goes into what Dom was talking about, where now we have to start fitting those ends to the curvature of the plate. And you can also see, like, right now I'm sitting a little, like the top is sitting a little far in. I'm not exactly vertical. But that you can, as we go, that will change a little bit. And so also kind of having that view, looking in through so I will actually look through the end pin hole, which is where this camera is, to look at how this fits vertically. So right now, obviously the top is going to have a little more of a gap at the front than the bottom will, just because it's on that angle.
Luke, can
So
I
you gotta
stop
kind of,
you- can I stop you there for a second? If you're doing a reset on an instrument that's already strung up, right? Typically, I would loosen a couple of strings to give me some movement, but I'm not going to take the end pin out and try to look in there. How do you best visualize it in that regard?
then in that, like, if it's got the strings on it, lots of times I will just try to look down through the F holes,
Yeah.
like through this upper lobe, kind of get as straight on the instrument as I can. And you
Right.
can kind of see how that post is sitting vertically. You can also take, like, if you want, I've seen guys take the mirrors, go clear into the bottom as far as they can get this way and look up towards the neck block. And
Yeah.
if they'll sometimes they'll use the neck block as a reference as vertical. So that the camera there doesn't, you can kind of see the neck block a little bit, but lots of times when I look in that end pin hole, I'll be using the side of the neck block as a vertical, comparison to my Soundpost.
Right. And one other question that just occurred to me, when I've done this on my basses, I made an LED lamp that I fit inside on the opposite F hole to give me plenty of light. Are you using any type of added light inside the instrument?
I will lots of times. I don't have it in there today because the second I do that, and the endoscope goes white,
Yeah,
and
sure.
you can't see anything.
Yeah.
But yeah, lots of times I will stick some sort of I have one of those, like, LED strip lights that StewMac used to sell years ago, that I'll use lots of times. Even lots of times I'll just take, if I have a desk lamp, especially with the new LED bulbs, you can just stick it really close to the F hole, and it will
Right.
give you plenty of light on the inside.
Just for the heck of it, this is a piece of an LED strip light that I scavenged, and I CA glued it down around a dowel, and then I soldered some leads to a 9-volt transformer that I had laying around. And this doesn't generate any heat and gives you a tremendous amount of light and fits right in the F hole. So you can make all sorts of lights that don't generate any heat either. You don't want to heat up the glue.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like when I was at school, that was kind of before the whole LED thing. And so, we'd be sticking our lights up near the violin, and so you always kind of had to watch and make sure you weren't going to blister the finish right here, because that lamp would start to warm it up.
Of course.
That's the one advantage of the LED bulbs nowadays, is you just don't have to worry about that. So what I'm doing now is I'm just taking, and I'm not taking any off of the front edge of this post. I'm just taking it off the back, just to on both ends, just to flatten that angle a little bit. And this is where you want to go cautious. You want to take your time, because now at this point, to move it 2 millimeters is just a couple shavings. When you're moving it in that direction. This violin doesn't have a really extreme arch, so it's definitely one of those where I gotta be cautious on how much I'm taking at once. Okay. So I just flatten the angles just a little bit, and try this again. See where I'm sitting. So now that I've got it shortened, you can see I actually have a little bit of wiggle room up and down inside the violin. Like, there's a little bit of a gap if I go up and down. So that tells me that I'm getting close. And lots of times I'll try to stick kind of the bottom where I want it to be and then pull the top in. Okay, and I'm a little off vertical, so I'm going to go in and pull that in the top. Now, I actually put a little bit of tension on this. Some people will take and, have a little string tension on this, on the instrument when they set the sound post. I like to do it with no string tension. So if it's a violin that already has strings and the sound post fell over, I will loosen all the strings and then set the sound post and then put it back up. And the reason I do that is so that when you go to unstring it, it doesn't automatically just fall over. Okay.
Luke, in that regard, do you worry about introducing too much tension at the sound post once the strings are up at pitch?
Yes. So one thing when I fit this, like I'm only pulling so hard out, and then I will actually check the lip on the outside. So this upper lobe of the F hole, if you get the sound post too tight, this will actually start to lift and displace.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the real quick check, and you'll see old violins that have had too tall a sound post for too many years, and this corner of the F hole will be sticking proud out of the top. Like it will be displaced, 2 to 3 millimeters. Like it's pretty dramatic.
Yeah.
Or if the sound post was set too far out. So as these, as an instrument ages, the arches actually get stretched by the sound post. So they'll actually get further apart on the sound post side. And so over time, if no one changes the sound post and they just keep pulling it tight, eventually it just works its way all the way out to near the F hole, and it just really changes, the arch right here in this area.
And you're going to destroy the tonality of the instrument by doing that besides.
Yeah, and you can go in, and I know like Jerry's done this where you take and you make a counter mold of the plate, and then you restructure the arch, back to where it should be. You use kind of heated sandbags and stuff like that, and you can actually manipulate this top back into position. But it is very, time intensive and very not cost effective, if you will.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So I'm actually sitting. I gotta move this up just a little bit. I believe this violin has a divot because I just took 2 shavings and now it's almost too short. It came out to 21, and it was just those little tiny shavings I took. And you can see it's not even vertical at the moment. So if I manipulate this back to, yep. So this violin actually has a divot. So this is one where I'd have to set the top in and then pull the bottom into place. I picked a good one. Ooh, come here. I'm going to check the old sound post on this and see how it fits.
So just to talk about what you're doing right now on the camera there, I have one of these mechanics grabbers that's spring loaded, and you can see the jaws opening and closing here. It's a long one, and it's spring and it's flexible. I use it on basses only. But if in a bass it's so large, if the sound post rolls all the way down the other end of the instrument, you need something to get in there and go after.
Yeah, I use the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite things.
This grabber saves my life all the time.
So as I look at this, I just grabbed the old sound post to compare the two, and the old sound post it's actually the same exact size as the one I just cut, and it is a little too short. So that tells me that this violin does need a new sound post. And on top of it, this sound post was actually, I don't know if you can, if the end grains show up right there, you can see the one was actually cut wrong.
Yeah.
So I am fighting the someone did cut the sound post wrong. There's like I said, there's the spots where the sound post adjuster goes in, and the grain has turned the wrong direction, so it has caused a divot on the inside. So let me see real quick if I can cut just a shade longer one and get over that divot. We'll do the quick method here. So since I have a sound post that I know is really, really close, I need to be just slightly longer, and longer than I think because I have a divot. So I'm going to cut 2 very quick bevels. About where I think they need to be.
For those of us who are overly thrifty, that short one you'd be able to save for like a 3/4.
Yeah, or even a different full.
Okay.
If
Yeah.
the arches are slightly lower, then it'll fit into a full size.
Cool.
So yeah, I have a whole bin of sound posts. And a lot of times when I cut a sound post, the first thing I do is go through that bin and see if I've got something that's close. And then I only have to like fit one end.
I didn't think any luthier threw away any piece of wood. Come on.
I do occasionally. I throw a lot more away now than I used to. Because it's like, how many sound posts do you need?
Right.
Once you have enough of them, you know, it's like I don't need that many hanging around. Okay. All right. Well, we're gonna. Oh, yep. There's that divot. Okay. All right. So now I'm going to check the fit on that. See if I need to adjust that top fit. That's looking pretty good. So what I would do with this one now, like once you do enough of these, you kind of get a really quick idea of what you need to do to make them, you know, what angles you're looking at and what taper. So that one I just cut real quick does actually fit pretty well. I'm going to take, let me check the measurements, see where I'm at. So that divot is actually sitting slightly outside. So it's sitting at 20, where this bass bar is sitting at 21. So I measure right there. So you can kind of measure and see what that looks like from the outside. So if we're sitting at 20, that's still a really good distance from that, you know, where the bridge foot would be. It's going to sit it pretty right behind that. I would like to have a little bit more in, but it's not going to happen because of that divot. You know, that sound post is always going to want to pop out into that divot where that old thing is, where the old one was. So this is one where I would just leave it as it is. Like since we're fighting that old divot, you can't really cut one that's like half out of that divot. So this one is going to be a little bit of a hard one where it is, you know, it's about 1 millimeter further out. That's not the craziest thing ever. Like it'll still sound fine. Because like I said, normally on a lot of these, on most violins, it sits about 18 or 19. So the fact that this one is so far in, you know, it's not going to hurt to have this sitting out at 20 versus 21. So this would be one where I would just leave it as is. You know, like you can take at this point, you can pop it back out. You can trim that front edge just a little bit. See if I can get this out without totally dropping it. Go. I need my tweezers that aren't in my pocket for some reason.
Is that something you would you patch or fill that hole if you had the top off and saw it?
That is a tough one. If you were doing a Soundpost patch, yes. Otherwise, it's the patches wouldn't be thick enough that it would hardly hold.
Oh, sure.
Because it's really, a tenth or two of a millimeter. And so there's not really anything like any good way to fill that divot without doing a Soundpost patch. Because you would only just have a shaving,
Yeah.
sitting in there.
Yeah.
So
it's
what I'm doing
way too
here,
invasive.
yeah. So Dom, this is where I was talking, like right here at the end, I'll take and just shave the front edge of this just at a slightly different angle. I'm just taking just a very slight angle off. And that's to give this just the slightest of a curve on these bevels.
Yeah.
And it doesn't need to be that much because you're not spanning that much distance. On a bass, it seems much more dramatic because you're covering a wider area.
Right. And are you attempting to get that curve to be absolutely complementary to either the top or the back so that there's no gap at all, right? That's the
Yes.
best.
The idea is to have it perfectly fit.
Exactly. Yeah.
Into that space. And so that's where, adding that little bit of curve into that top structure. And then when you pull it into position, it's now a perfect mate for that spot.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want 100% coverage, or would you hollow it out like you would possibly a foot of a bridge?
You want to get as much as you can.
Okay.
So as close to 100 as you can get. And that's purely just because you want to avoid making a divot. That's so if you just have this ring that 95% of the pressure is on, then it's going to want to crush that spruce. On the maple back, it's not as like it wouldn't be that critical because the maple's going to hold up. But that the spruce top will crush if you have that focused into one little spot. And I've totally seen where in some like cheaper factory instruments, they just cut a bevel and they literally just pull it into position and the top crushes and fits the Soundpost. It's like I don't stand by that at all, but I've seen it where basically the angle was obviously wrong and they just shoved it into place and just crushed the spruce to make it fit.
Yeah, and if the curvature is uneven and there's gaps there, sometimes the post can actually even move and it can cause other frequency problems as well. You can get weird things happening.
Oh yeah, for sure. So right there's, so that's the basics of actually cutting the Soundpost. And let me go grab a violin real quick and we'll talk, positions.
Luke, when you're chasing the fit, what's a reasonable gap around the outside of your post?
The ideal is 0. So
Right.
The closer to 0 you can get, the better. Reasonable is just, that is going to be your call. Where you
what's
feel
your reasonable?
I shoot for, if I've got, say, 75% of it, then I will kind of call it. So like 75% of that area is covered. Then
And in terms of eyeballing a gap, like 0.1, 0.2 millimeters, like what's an acceptable figure?
Yeah, that's, I doubt it's even that because I really am shooting for that thing to fit perfectly all the way around. And so like any gap I try to get rid of. I've cut many Soundposts and it's had, just a little gap on one end or the other and I've recut it. It's, that is one of those where you just kind of have to, I just kind of have to say, it's like you have to decide what you're willing to put up with, Obviously there's been more that there's been a couple that were just a really hard fit and, because of the shapes of the tops where they have a divot, it's like they're just not going to fit well. And that's kind of the nature of that beast unless you go in and do some internal work. I would say, on average, I mean, you want it, a couple thousands at most, kind of gap. Like you want it pretty well fit, as best as to your ability.
Sure. So real quick on that note of that tool that somebody had asked about for finding the length of the Soundpost that sounds like you don't use. Do you have any kind of feel for? I see the one with the adjustable feet that more or less kind of shows you the rough angle. Is that something that many violin repair folks are using, or is that one of those tools that's kind of advertised to people that don't know any better?
I actually haven't seen it, to be honest. I haven't looked into that stuff for, like I said, 10 years because I just never used that style of tool. But if they have one, it's not a bad idea.
So I was listening in. I'm guessing this is the post tool. So I've seen them with feet on there. So if you put it in there, you pull it out, and it'll be at the angle more or less of what you were trying to check.
That's a cool idea.
So I didn't know if it's considered gimmicky with the violin folks because it's unnecessary, or if it's actually something that they use.
Well, that you'd have to get the violin folks to actually talk about it first. So that's one of those things where there's a lot of violin makers that won't even talk about it. But yeah, definitely it's one of the, I think that would be especially starting out, that would be really helpful. Eventually you do just get a feel for it. Like you really can, you can look at that arch and go, okay, these are the angles I'm shooting for. And you can get really close just by eye. Like you just cut a couple hundred Soundposts, you'll get there. Just like doing, a lot of us can look down a fretboard and can just eyeball 95% of the frets that are wrong. You don't have to have the tooling. So it's more or less that kind of feel. Like you will just get there.
Luke, I missed the part about the grain orientation. I'm assuming you're cross grain to the
yes,
top and back. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. So so the grain in the top is going vertically. You want the grain in your Soundpost at a 90 degree.
Okay.
And that's purely to stop, if they're lined up, those grains can kind of mash together.
Right.
So actually I can show you because the other Soundpost, the old Soundpost in here was actually cut wrong. So if I take these two Soundposts, here we go. I don't know if you can see my desktop one or not. So we have the two. Oh, what's going on? Did my one drop? Oh, there it is. Okay. So we have the two Soundposts. You'll see where the Soundpost center marks are. So that's the narrow end of the Soundpost. If I turn it, see if I can get it close enough to actually show the grain orientation. Come on, focus. Anyway, you'll see this one is the old one, and it's 90 degrees to where the tool was inserted. That's the wrong. You want the tool to go in with the grain. And that way, when you set it, it'll be at a 90 degree from the plate.
Also makes the tool go in more cleanly between the grain lines, and it'll hold
Yes.
better.
Yeah, it will hold better because you're going in. You're going in between two of the hard, to the soft of the grain.
Right.
So when you're putting it in, you're putting it straight in, not swinging it into location, but pulling it into location.
Yeah. So I'll put it in, get it vertical in the inside, and then pull it towards the outside. And of course, I'll have to go back in and straighten it up.
Yeah. Do you generally put the top in first? Try to touch the top, kind of, or you're just kind of pulling it? Okay.
Yeah, it's one of those where I try to keep it as vertical as possible, but like this particular one where I know I'm fighting a divot in there, I will go ahead and put the top in first and then pull the bottom into place because it's gonna slide against the maple a lot smoother than it will trying to go against the grains of the top. You'll get this like chunk as you're hitting all the hard grain lines.
And
so
this is a silly question. Would you say that the post is running parallel with your post setter so that you can keep an idea, or are you watching with a mirror to keep your straight up and downness?
I usually just look through the F-hole as I'm installing it.
Oh, okay.
So, as I'm doing the install, you can just kind of sight through that F-hole and see what angle, you're sitting at. And then, you try to keep it as vertical as you can as you pull it in. You can always readjust it afterwards. Like if you pull it in and it pops off the tool setter, you can go in and tap the bottom or the top and straighten it back out. So it's one of those where it's not, it's not super critical to hit it right at first. You can work your way to it. Where there's no glue and it's just there by tension, you have plenty of time to, to mess with it and fiddle with it to make it right.
Hey, Luke.
Yeah.
Aside from the Soundpost having fallen out, when are we going to have to, how do we know we're going to have to adjust the Soundpost? What are indications for having to cut a new Soundpost?
So normally cutting a new Soundpost, to be honest, you don't have to cut very many usually. We can get rid of the endoscope now. I won't need it for the rest of the time here. I'm going to put a different violin on it and we'll talk about this. So let me just pull this violin. It's got strings on it. So basically what you're looking for as far as when you need to replace it, normally you're only replacing it when it has gone too short. That really is kind of the bulk of the time that you're going to be doing that. You're going to be doing a lot more adjusting. So someone brings in a violin and, you sight into, so as I don't know if this will come through, as you sight into the F-hole, it's too dark on the inside. You're going to be looking at where the Soundpost is positioned on that instrument. So if it has gone too far towards the bridge, if it's sitting really close to the bridge, then obviously you'll want to move it back. Or I have seen them where the Soundpost has wandered down into the lower bout somewhere. For whatever reason, it got dropped, it got hit, as they're traveling, and this Soundpost has just wandered off. And because of the string tension, it stays vertical. It just sits there and meanders over time. The worst ones I've seen one up in almost underneath the fingerboard that had meandered its way up that way. I have no idea how, but it did it.
How did it sound?
Very bad.
Oh.
They brought it in because they're like, it just doesn't sound like it used to. And I'm like, well, let's check the Soundpost. Where is the Soundpost? Where has it gone? And, that's when eventually I was like, why is it? I don't know. So I loosen the strings, pop it loose and, bring it back into here. And all of a sudden they're like, oh, it sounds like it used to. Yeah. It's because it's not off in the, ethos somewhere.
You said it earlier, but how far behind the bridge do you want the Soundpost roughly?
You're from the back edge of the bridge to the front edge of the Soundpost. You want about the third of the diameter of the Soundpost. And the reason they say that is and that is the technical term, because a lot of people use different size Soundposts. So you can change the tone by how big the Soundpost is, the actual diameter of the Soundpost. So you're going to find a range of anywhere from minimum probably 4.5 to 5 millimeter. Maximum violin you want that you'd ever want to put in, it'd be 6 to 6.5. So I mean that doesn't sound like a huge variation, but that is, that diameter changes the way the plate vibrates. And it's one of those things for me in particular, my own taste in as far as tone goes, I like about the 5 to 5.5, that area. And it's you're not going to notice in a 0.5 millimeter, it's not going to be real dramatic. If you're going from a 4.5 to a 6.5, yeah, you'll hear a difference definitely. And so I just kind of shoot for that middle of the road, and that seems to work the best for me as far as that goes. And
sorry, so you like a Soundpost that's 5.5 millimeters.
Yeah, 5.5 to 5.
Okay.
And some of that just depends on. So sometimes, I've already sanded this. I will usually make sure that my Soundpost material is round. Since I'm in the desert, it actually shrinks when I get it. So I order a 6 and let it sit here for a couple months. It usually shrinks down to with the grain shrinks down to about 5.5. I chuck it into a drill and then just use sandpaper on it and bring it back to round. And so by the time I do that, I'm in the 5.5 to maybe like 5.2, somewhere in that neighborhood. And it's one of those where like I'm not real critical about it. You will find makers that are like, oh, you got to have a 5.75 whatever, and I've just never noticed a couple thousandths or a couple, a tenth or two of a millimeter making that much difference in a Soundpost diameter in tone. So I will say the like the 6.5 is big enough and bulky enough that I do notice a difference in that, like when you get clear up to that 6.5. But it's one of those where I don't even know how to describe it. It kind of like it takes some of the treble out. Like and it's kind of it is noticeable, but it's subtle. Mm-hmm. So as far as that goes, now as far as adjusting the Soundpost, you want to keep the Soundpost, vertical on the inside, but I can always look at this as kind of like an EQ slide. The further away from the bridge you go, kind of the more bass you're going to get. And as you slide towards the bridge, but you don't want to go under the bridge. Like you never want to have this thing directly under because it will just kill it as far as tone sounds. Because that bridge will no longer be able to pivot the system. It just makes that whole top rigid. But as you scoot it closer to the bridge, you will get more like it basically starts to hamper the mid range, and so it sounds more trebly. So on a violin, normally it's like it doesn't need help with treble. It's got plenty of that. And then as far as like if you have an old violin that you're trying to adjust, there is kind of as Ed was talking, like behind the bridge foot. If you have one that it seems like the bass bar is really far in or really far out, it seems kind of unusual or dramatic, you can also just kind of put the Soundpost behind the bridge foot. Like if you look at where the solid part of the bridge foot, where it's not the scooped out ends, but right the dead center of the foot, you can just kind of stick that Soundpost right behind that foot as far as inline, come back a little bit, and that is a decent location. Like that is a very acceptable location for that, even if it doesn't match where the bass bar is over here. So that is another just kind of a quick reference. If you're looking at a Soundpost adjustment and you feel like the bass bar seems like in a strange location, just stick it behind the bridge foot. And basically what you do is I just take the little ruler here, I measure from basically the solid part of that foot to the F hole on this one is 20. I go in and measure. I'm sitting at 20.5. So I'm really close to where where that would be anyway. So that Soundpost is sitting, the outside edge of that Soundpost is sitting right there. So right actually where we're talking.
On that measurement, Luke, if you go closer to the bass side of the instrument versus the treble, is it the same on a violin as on a bass, where you can actually alter the volume or the power of the bass strings versus the treble strings, or is it less pronounced on a violin?
Violin is less pronounced just because it's more all treble.
Right.
Like the bass end just doesn't exist as much.
Yeah.
In the violin. And it's one of those where it's like I wouldn't mostly, pulling, moving the Soundpost side to side is really just adjusting the tension of the top. Right. If you adjust it in, it's going to make that top a little bit looser.
Right.
And so that will definitely it's more of like you're not going to raise the bass side, but you're going to lessen the amount of trebles you got.
Right. Right.
And that vice versa. If you pull it towards the outside, you're going to tighten that top. The trebles are going to want to come out a little bit more. Mm-hmm. But you have to be wary about pulling it too far out, because then you start having it, disform the arch, back here. So there are some kind of like, going this direction is worse than going towards the middle.
Yeah. I mean, just since we're talking Soundpost, have you ever seen a Soundpost with a spring-loaded pin in it?
No.
So this is from my travel bass. I have a Colstein travel bass that has a removable neck, and this sits toward the back of the instrument, and it's designed so that it doesn't fall when you take the bridge and strings off.
Hold on a second, Dom. Okay, show that bad, Larry.
So this is a bass Soundpost that is designed to have a spring and a pin in the end here, and this sits against the back of the instrument. This is where the top is, and it's designed not to fall when you pull the bridge and strings off and remove the neck. So the mechanism is no longer in this Soundpost, but that's what, because I don't take the neck off that bass anyway, but that's what this was designed to be with. And you can see the notch in here, right? And you can see the orientation of the grain. It's the same.
Yep.
It's the same orientation. But this is about 6.5 inches long, a little less than 3/4 in diameter, just to give you some sizing reference.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Dom, I challenge you to do that same thing to a violin Soundpost. I want to see that.
You need a very small drill bit, yes, and maybe a small brad point nail might work.
Well, I think you also want like a tongue extension for sticking your tongue out while you're doing it.
Man, I'll say that
Can I lick this one? Right.
All right.
Yeah, that's quite the system. I see where they're going, because a bass top will move a lot under tension, and there are definitely those guys out there, and I don't know if the Colstein did that or not. There are some guys who will actually preload some tension onto the plate before they cut the Soundpost.
Right. This one is my my summer Soundpost. This was my winter Soundpost, and it may sound funny to talk about that, but Grace, when you were asking before, when do you need to make adjustments to the post? Obviously, during every change of season, so from winter to spring to fall, humidity changes, temperature changes. My basses will be very cranky, and adjustments won't always do it. So I have two different size posts depending on the time of year, and then you have to fit those in at the same, to get the tone that you want to have back.
Yeah, and that I will say is more in a bass than you'll ever find in a violin. Yeah. Violins just don't adjust that much. It's like you don't. Basses is very common to have a summer bridge and winter bridge as well. Same with cellos. So that's more things for the larger instruments. Violins just don't fluctuate that much that it's that crazy. But yes, basses do get rather they can get very cranky as you have the change of seasons.
But just to finish the thought though, I previously had a 3/4 size laminate bass that was basically bulletproof. Mm-hmm. I did maybe one post adjustment every 5 years on that bass, and no matter what the weather did, that thing didn't move. It was really a great workhorse instrument that you didn't have to think about, and also for jazz work, if you're going to pitch a lot, the tonality of the instrument is important, but less so if you're going to draw a bow across the strings. You really notice a bad post setup on a bowing action rather than a plucked action, at least for basses. So. Yeah,
it's the same for violins and cellos, but they're most always basses where plucking is more of an option. Like you rarely hear violins getting plucked, so they kind of don't even bother.
Right.
With dealing with that.
Hey, Eb, can you speak quickly to your circumnavigation of child labor laws in there?
I'll be doing a presentation on that later.
Yeah. Were you having like a play-by-play there? Were people in your shop setting Soundposts while Luke was showing how to do it?
Mostly observing and playing with the tools. We've dropped a few in and done some measurements.
Okay, that's step one.
Yeah.
Cool. Do you
just a couple hundred more to go? No,
my kids, Ian, are both fiddlers, so I'm having them watch these classes. So hopefully they can work on their own stuff someday.
Yeah. Hey, Eb. Just so you know, I've seen you on Facebook on occasion, and you're really good at that fiddling business. So
my kids are. I just play guitar.
I know.
Okay.
So let me I say real quick before we're done here. I'll show you just a real quick tool you can make to check your position of the sound post. I just take any business card and I cut it a little bit narrower and then put a split in it. Then you can stick it on the inside, put it on the front edge of that sound post, and you'll actually see where that front edge of the sound post sits. So that's a super, super quick, easy like reference tool you can make. And like on basses, I've used just like a piece of cardboard, done the same exact thing. It's just a really quick reference tool to check a sound post real quick. If you're wondering, if you're not quite feeling where that's sitting vertically, you can just cut that. And now you actually have a physical reference on the outside of what that gap looks like.
The pro players I've seen keep one of those in their case just to check to make sure things aren't moving.
Yeah. So like I said, it's just super quick. You can just use any, like I like business card because it's flexible enough but stiff enough that it makes for a decent little tool. And it's easy to find if you lose it.
What do you think about these ones? These like that hold it with a string? Have you messed with those?
I haven't yet. I've actually been toying on buying one just to play with it. I like the idea of it because it's just very secure. Because if you're doing the fitting, you can just leave that attached the whole time you're doing the fitting and then just unattach it at the end. Like I think it's a great idea, honestly, as long as it comes in and out of the F hole cleanly, and you're not marring up the sound hole on the way or the F hole on the way. I think it's a great idea. I've just done the same method for 20 years. And so it's kind of just the way I always do it. I don't think there's anything wrong with trying a new setup like that.
All right, cool. Well, everybody unmute and thank Luke for another splendid presentation.
Thank you, Luke.
Thank you, Luke.
Yep, no problem, anytime.
Thanks, Luke.